Hello creeps! Merry Creepmas! How is everyone doing this lovely December day? Today I just have my reading wrap up from November for you guys. So these are all the books that I read last month. We're just gonna go through them, give you a quick synopsis, tell you my rating of each one, the usual. So the first, let me grab my books, The first book that I read this month was the book that you guys picked for the October book club book, which we do live streams on YouTube. If you guys are interested in reading the books for this month, keep a check out in the community tab post, because I think it's going to get a little bit confusing because we're going to have to tell you what the book is for the following month before that live stream happens. Do you get what I'm saying? You'll see, but just go to the community tab post and you can see what book we're reading each month, and we're going to do one every month for this year. So I'm really excited for that. It's awesome. So this is the one that you guys picked. This is the Amityville Horror by Jay Anson, and wow, was this book trash. This is about the Lutz family who moves into the Amityville house after the horrible DeFeo murders, and they end up experiencing some paranormal activity and fleeing the house some 20 odd some days after moving in without any of their stuff. So this is the account of what happened. If you watch the live stream, then you'll know that we did a little bit of digging afterwards and pretty much everything seems to be debunked. I am gonna say that even if what the Lutz's experience was true, like even if they did have paranormal experiences at the house, I'm gonna just go out on a crazy limb here and say that Jay Anson either exaggerated or completely fabricated everything that's in this story. And I would love to have been alive in the 70s when this book came out and read it through the lens of living in the 70s, because this book freaked people out, and reading it through a modern day lens, it's just absurd. It's funny, it's ridiculous. The days just keep increasing. So one day they'll be like, there's a ghostly face in the fireplace, and the next day they're like, there's black stuff leaking in the toilet, and then the next day they're like, I was levitating. It's just so ridiculous and absurd. You just have to roll your eyes at it. And if you read it as it being humorous, then it can be an enjoyable book. But this was maybe one of the more unenjoyable horror books I've ever read. In this book, ghosts give you diarrhea. There's green slime leaking from the wall. Like, I'm telling you, the absurdity of this book is never ending. And the use of exclamation points is criminal. Lock this guy up. I know he's dead. Get his ghost. Put him in jail. It's criminal. It's criminal every chapter. It's 3 a.m. and then the ghost appeared and then the statue moved. Everything. It's absurd. It's absurd. But I would have loved to read this through the lens of the 70s and to have really experienced this book back then. It was a cultural phenomenon that I don't think that we will ever comprehend. Real quick before we move on to the next book, I don't know that I've really talked about Patreon in any of my videos, so I just wanted to bring it to your guys' attention. You know what? Let's take a quick look at what's going on over at Patreon. Does that not give you a visual that you wish you could erase from your mind? Oh my god, it's so salty! What is that? Oh, meet the chlamydia clown? Excuse me? But I always end up... Oh dear Lord. This year for Easter, my children will not be getting Lucifer's testicles. Amen. Yeah, it gets a little weird over there. We have different tiers over there. So there's a tier where you can just join this kind of like, it's Discord, but it's basically just this group chat where we just talk about books all day. It's wonderful. It's fantastic. And then there's another tier where we have live streams each week. So we do movie nights. These are our December movie nights that we're going to be watching this week. And then our last tier, we have different videos. What I just showed you is from the videos over on Patreon. So it's a lot of fun over there. And if you want the 12 Days of Creepmas from... I started it last year, but I decided to do it over on Patreon. It's over there. So, you know, if you want to watch the 12 Days of Creepmas, you can have it over there. And if not, here is just fine. But I will leave a link down below for you in case anybody is interested. The next book that I read, I cannot find. I don't know where it is, which is weird because I read it the same time I read this one, but it's Carmilla by J. Sheridan Le Fanu. So I wanted to read this one as well as the Amityville one for the live stream because I knew there wasn't going to be a whole lot to analyze in this book. So we did Carmilla, and that one was a lot of fun. I mean, I've read this one before. It's one of my favorite vampire books. It's about a young girl. She's living kind of remotely with her father in this big castle house thing. She's really lonely, and her friend who was supposed to come visit her suddenly passed away, so she's extra upset about that. This carriage comes along, and the carriage falls over. This girl Carmilla gets hurt, and they end up taking her in, and she stays with the family. I think the other girl's name is Laura. And then once Carmilla comes and stays with them, weird things start happening around the town. Young women are getting very ill, hallucinating, getting fevers, and then dying suddenly. So could it be related to Carmilla? Dun dun dun. It's a fantastic book. It predates Dracula and is said to be an inspiration behind Dracula as well. So it's just kind of interesting how well known Dracula is. And I think Carmilla is like, you know, getting her shining moment, but definitely isn't as obviously well discussed as a book like Dracula is. So I love that book. There's some really cool scenes in there that I really enjoy. So we got to talk about that on the live stream too. The next book that I read was Cackle by Rachel Harrison. I really wanted to read this one because I read So Thirsty and absolutely loved it. And so I thought Cackle would be kind of the same. So Thirsty was about vampires, a horror story about vampires. This one was about witches. So I thought, okay, it's probably horror too. And it's really not. It's more of a cutesy story, which is completely fine and there's nothing wrong with it. And I still really like Rachel Harrison's writing style, so I didn't hate this book by any means. I think I gave it a 3.9 because it wasn't my favorite book ever, but it was still entertaining. I think if you go into it just knowing it's kind of like a cutesy tale, not cutesy, I mean like it's about a woman coming into herself. Her and her boyfriend break up after a really long relationship. She ends up moving to a small remote town and meeting this older woman who kind of is showing her that it's okay to be alone and to love yourself kind of thing. But it's told through the metaphor of a witch, you know? So I really like her use of traditional horror elements as metaphors for women a lot of the time, you know, just aging, getting older, moving into a different phase in their life. That doesn't mean they're getting old. That's not what I'm saying. But I just mean, you know, growing up, we're all aging. Every day we're aging. So it's like that. And it's much more about her and her relationship with herself and this woman and just coming into her own after a breakup. Then it focuses on the horror elements. So I think because I read So Thirsty before and in my mind I was associating this one with that, I was a little bit, not disappointed, but a little bit like, oh, this isn't really what I was looking for. So it's more definitely my fault and not the writer's fault at all, because I still really enjoyed the writing and I still like the context behind the story. But yeah, just less horror elements, but more just like a cute story of becoming your own as a woman. The next one I read is A Child Alone with Strangers by Philip Fracassi. This one was so good. I gave this one a 4.25. It was a 4.5 up until a certain point, but if you have read this book, I guarantee you know the scene that knocked it down to a 4.25. It's a great book. Philip Fracassi is such a fantastic writer. I've read quite a few of his books and novellas over the past year, and I've really just fallen in love with his writing. He's amazing. This one's about a young child who gets abducted. He has some abilities that normal people don't possess. We get a little bit of information on the people that take him, and we get alternating perspectives. And we also come to find that there's something else lurking in the woods that might not be human. It's a really great book. The way I felt reading this book felt like when I first picked up a Stephen King book for the very first time. I don't know, there was something just so unique and new and refreshing about that story that it really brought back that feeling of excitement of like reading an adult book for the first time. I really loved this. The next one that I read was Rest Stop by Nate Cassidy. This is my first Nate Cassidy book. I read your comments, how appalled you were that I haven't read a book called Mary, so I've added it to my list and I promised to pick that one up. This is about a man, you'll never guess it, stuck in a rest stop, and you'll never guess it, there's blood. And it's just kind of his fight for his life. I'm gonna say something kind of weird, but just stick with me for a second. I kind of feel like this book is the opposite of the movie Bodies, Bodies, Bodies. Let me explain though. You know how that movie is basically just making fun of the younger generation and just saying, I mean, this is obviously just my interpretation of the movie, but it's basically saying like you have money, you have a roof over your head, you have food, you have everything you need, and you still go out of your way to make things a big deal that aren't a big deal. This book is the opposite of that for me. It's understanding that past generations have had traumatic experiences like war and, you know, have been closer related to war than maybe somebody of our generation, but it doesn't invalidate the traumatic experiences that just day-to-day people go through. And it doesn't mean that those traumatic experiences don't shape you as a person, for better or worse. That's kind of what I got from this book. Let me know if you got a different read about it, but it was kind of just like an interesting snapshot of older generations versus a new generation, and like going through a traumatic experience and seeing how you come out on the other side. I don't know. Let me know what you guys thought about that one. I gave that one a 4 stars. I really like that. The next two, I'm not going to go into too much detail, but this is Fleshgiving by Lady Gorehort, and this is an Extreme Turkey Dinner by C. Commissar. They're just turkey Thanksgiving related extreme horror books that I read for a previous video, so go watch that if you want more information on those. The next book that I read, I'm not sure if I'm going to pronounce this correctly, but it's called Vi, and it's by Nikolai Gogol. I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing that incorrectly, but it was published in 1835. So this is an old story. The reason I wanted to read it is because it was supposedly the inspiration behind Black Sunday, that Mario Bava movie. And so I wanted to read it to see kind of how closely it resembled that movie, which for me, it felt very, very different. And it felt like maybe it could have been loosely inspired by it, but I don't know, maybe I need to revisit the movie to know for sure. But I was just interested in kind of reading it. I haven't rated this one yet though. There's a lot of stuff in here that I feel like I need to sit with more. Sometimes the shorter stories are more difficult for me to just give a quick rating to. It's easier for me to analyze full-length novels because you have a few hundred pages to really sit and digest what you're reading and analyze and dig beneath the surface and find the metaphor. But with a short story like this, you read it and it's done so quickly. I wanted to do a little bit more research into it because I know that there's more under the horror story of this. So basically it's about a group of 3 men. There's one that's a theologian, there's one that's a philosopher, and one that's a rhetorician. I knew I was going to pronounce that incorrectly. So they're going through the woods and they kind of lose their place, like the road and stuff, and they don't think that they can make it back. They end up finding this house with this woman who reluctantly lets them come and spend the night. But one of them wakes up where she's on their back. And so he takes off and he like beats her and runs away. Okay, he's scared of her. Then there's this other story that he hears from a neighboring town of this guy who's like pretty powerful, and his daughter has been beaten and left for dead. And her dying wish is that this guy, who's the philosopher, goes and prays to her body for 3 days in a church. So he goes back, and by the time he gets back, I think she's dead. And so he spends 3 nights praying over her body, and weird things happen. He starts seeing and hearing things that are happening in the church. I'm not going to give away the ending or anything, but really interesting story to read from the 1800s, and just kind of cool to see. I mean, obviously, like more of a foundational horror story. Yeah, that's old as shit. So it was cool, but I do want to do a little bit more research and see what I'm missing. Like, I'm pretty sure those 3 positions held by those men tell more about the story and what actually happens, but I don't know. Okay, let's move on to the next one. I read Pumpkin Pie Parting. This was number 15 in my Murder in the Mix Cozy Mystery series. This is the one I was really, really stressed about because the last one I told you left off on this big cliffhanger and I didn't know what was going to happen, and I was very nervous going into this book, and this was a roller coaster. This one, more than any other one, I think shocked me, surprised me, made me happy, made me sad. It did make me tear up a little bit, and it's like silly, and I understand that, but I love it. I don't care. I love these books so much. They bring me happiness and like excitement to read a cute story every month that no other book has given me. You know what I mean? It's my comfort read. It is. So I love these, and I think this one has been my favorite. I rated this a 5 stars. Like, this was a perfect book to me. I love these. I love them. I love Lottie Lemon. I think it's so cute. The last one that I read was The Willows by Algernon Blackwood. Is that how you pronounce his name? I'm not 100% sure. This one was really fun. This one was published in, I think it was 1907. Yeah, 1907. This is a story about 2 men. They kind of go on these little adventures. They take a canoe and they go down in the rivers, and then they'll stop somewhere and camp for the night and, you know, just have fun. One time though, they end up camping in this area that's surrounded by willows. The water begins to rise, so they can't leave as easily as they would. At first they feel kind of weird in the area, and then it starts coming to them that maybe there's some other supernatural force at work. It's actually kind of a creepy story, especially one that was written in the 1900s. I really loved this. I thought it was so great. It kind of reminded me a little bit of The Ruins, although there's more of like a supernatural, well, I guess The Ruins is like that too. No, yeah, it gave me the same kind of vibe as The Ruins. I wouldn't say it reminded me of The Ruins. The Ruins gets pretty dark and gross and bloody and gory. This one wasn't like that, but kind of the same feel. Just the feel of being somewhere in nature, somewhere that's naturally made, but that gives you that eerie, odd feeling that you shouldn't be there kind of thing. I thought that this book was like, yeah, I was really impressed by it. I really enjoyed this one. So I'm excited to check out more of his work. I think that was the first thing that I've ever read from him, if I'm remembering correctly. But yeah, I highly recommend that one if you want something old to read. But those are the books that I read in November. Again, if you want to know what I'm reading in December, or you want to check out the 12 Days of Creepmas, you can head over to Patreon. I'll leave it linked down below. If not, I will see you here back on Sunday for another horror video. So thank you so much for watching. Bye! The Christmas tree's on fire.